Hey YouTube, Brian Phillips here. Airbus A380 here. Got the 380. And we are going to continue working on the spoilers today. As I mentioned in the last spoiler video, part 3, I was going to figure this out and then come back to you and show you how to do it. So you can see I've got this side partially done, and this side is just where we left it off, okay? So you can see exactly how I do this. Now there's one other thing I was talking about doing, and that is to reinforce the structure of this plane, particularly the wings. That's all I care about. The wings are too flexible. So I've got these rods, carbon fiber strips. Comes in 2 pieces, so you can see. Of course they don't give that stuff away, but it usually works pretty good. And as you can see, I ended up digging into a 9-gram Hex Tronic Servo. That's double-sided taped in. It's just right along the edge. I had to bore out a little material and then make an extension. I'll show you how it works. But for now, real quick, let's take a look at this rod. This is in flat, and it's pushed all the way down. These wires were just periodically glued with mucilage, so I was able to just real simply remove the mucilage and just lift the wires. So the idea is I'm able to run along this pocket. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn it on end so that I have a bunch of strength. But one of my issues is I've got these 2 servo wires here, one for this flap and then one for this servo that's going to control the spoilers, which are run right off of the aileron circuit. And as you can see, I've got this wide in, which is just ridiculous. I'm not going to do that permanently. The permanent solution is going to be these 2 are going to actually be electrically tied together here. And I don't really think I'm going to actually even do disconnection points or anything. I'll just chop it off, split it apart, put the wires together, blammo whammo, done deal. Then I can take my Y out from up here on the receiver. So the whole idea there is that we're mitigating some weight. And this servo, believe it or not, has wire all the way back to the receiver, which is, I love those servos with the super long leads. Usually they're indicated as like an aileron servo, but I never seem to find them. But anyway, that's kind of where we are right now. Give you a shot of how this works. Get the receiver turned on, make sure the throttle cuts on. We'll go ahead and, this is just here. We'll be doing that fairly quick here because it's going to get in the way of some of my wiring. But I should be able to show you how this works now. Alright, so got this thing propped up so it's off the bean bags. Okay. Spoiler. See, it's catching right here. I might need to do something about that. Okay. And you're probably wondering, well, what are you doing with the bottom sweep? I'm just letting it go out. I don't care. It's not going to hurt anything. Now, I'd have to change one setting. I have a negative differential in here now, because if I had no differential, watch how much deployment there is. Okay, so there's down, and then there's up. So it's just crazy amounts of deployment. So what this is going to do is it's going to tame that deployment, because now we have almost the entire wing length working. So I'm actually going to set it to like minus 75. Okay, that's too much. So we'll do like minus 50, which is going to look a lot like a real one. Now the only other thing too I had to compromise on is that this is going to deploy at the same time all the time, but only a little bit. Okay, when I do a full deployment, then it does deploy a lot. Okay, I'm still kind of hitting that. Okay, and then of course the air pressure is going to somewhat tend to push that down. Now what did I use for springs to return the spoilers back? I used chunks of rubber band. I cut a bunch at the same length, and then various times I cut them in half until I got to a point where it worked well. Ironically enough, it's always my flap servo that keeps making noise now. And these are just taped down now. I was thinking about making a piece of plastic with a slit and a hole drilled. Then I could tie a knot in the rubber band and slip it through and then like glue it down. But then I got to thinking, why not just tape it down with high quality white tape that you're never going to ever see? And I thought, you know what? That's the way I'm doing it. So the beauty of it is that there's 3 of them. So there's some level of redundancy. And basically this whole thing, I'll deploy it so you can see, is held by one piece of 1mm rod, okay, that's zigzag back and forth, and then it comes over here, so it just applies a little bit of pressure there, okay? And then of course this always acts, and catching there might not be a bad thing actually, because then when I have full deployment, this is going to want to get pushed down. But see how sturdy it is? But you're not depending on the strength of the actual servo, which is just a crappy plastic gear 9-gram servo from Hex Tronics. So in my opinion, we've got it done in terms of the action. Now it's just a matter of, okay, do we want to tighten up this spring? The return spring in this case is just a rubber band. Or do we want to, add another one over here? I'm not even going to add any more. I'm just going to do these 3. And I'm literally going to tape them down and it's going to be done. Now this, I did a piece of double-sided tape under. And you remember how I glued these up and did all that crap? Well, probably not going to do that on these because this is a Hex Tronic Servo, which means I'm going to definitely at some point have one fail. They just seem to always be junk, but they're really light junk, and that's part of the reason why I stuck with using them, okay? So my hope was to actually just use this white tape. Of course, you could get away with a variety of different factors. I used a little bit of this 3M double-sided tape to hold it in the pocket. And of course, we'll go through how that's going to work. This is a 3M product as well. Ironically enough, I guess I didn't realize that at the time. I didn't realize I should be billing 3M for this. But so what I'd be doing is peeling this up, and this is duct tape actually. So it's quite strong and it's very sturdy, but it's also quite opaque. So you can see it'll bleed some light through, but I mean this is foam, it's all bleeding light through. Okay, so I'll just show you how easy this is going to work. Whoops. Cool, right? So now one other thing to keep in mind is that as you notice I bumped my stabilizer. Well, the stabilizer is going to act upon these servos because they're actually part of the actual aileron circuit, okay? So just be aware of that. Now I never did tape over these. I was kind of waiting to do the next stages to see if I needed to do any more. So now that we have this quick overview, we're just going to kind of jump back in and just keep working, if you guys don't mind. I hate to leave you out of any of this, but there's just certain parts of this process that are just too much guess and check. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't want you guys seeing it all because it's a pain in the butt. Although, to be honest with you, it takes me about 1/3 as long to do this stuff when I'm not filming because I'm not always trying to make sure that things are in focus and all that crap. So, alright, so this time I'm gonna try to avoid hitting that silver. Might need to do a little bit of trimming. So we'll deploy the flaps. I don't think we'll be able to get away with that. See, I'm just mostly trying to keep everything in position spatially so that I don't have to re-tension the rubber band. But as you can see, I really got those things nice and dry. You know how we had used just a little bit of kicker the other day. Okay, so we'll throw this right over the top so that we don't get up onto that painted surface. Okay, and then this time I need to go down a little bit more yet. So I'm going to get a flat bladed screwdriver for this. So I had one of my viewers the other day was commenting that he was getting seasick from watching my video because the helmet bounces around a lot, and kind of gave him the usual response. I'm sure he's watching this, so you know who you are. You know. I wish I could do a little better, but he had mentioned something about wanting to see me go back to the tripod, and I just thought, no, I'm not doing that. The tripod sucked. I didn't feel like I had stuff in focus half the time, and then I was always constantly having to run around to see if things were in focus, because I'd have to run over here and then, okay, let me just make sure, and it was such a pain in the fiasco butt. Currently, my helmet is not of super high quality, and I don't know, someday maybe I'll come up with something better, but right now this is probably the best I'm going to do. I mean, to be honest with you, of all the stuff I do on my YouTube channel, the mod and build series is probably the lowest producing in terms of views and advertising revenue and stuff like that. I mostly do it because I know you guys love to see how this stuff gets done. You don't just want to necessarily see the finished product all the time, although sometimes I'm sure you do. And if you do, you can watch that. So I guess at this point it's kind of a big request to somehow redo my entire configuration, so I'm probably not going to be doing any of that unless you guys come up with some great plans for me and I can try some stuff. I tried doing some video stabilization the other day, but these videos are super long, so that just means I literally have them offline for a few hours while YouTube does video stabilization on the file. So I don't know if you guys particularly like that either. Okay, so now that we've got that one on there, let's just test to make sure everything still looks the same. Okay, so that looked about the same. Now you can see through this a little bit. I'm not crazy about the fact that you can see through that so well, so I might just take a little bit more tape, just kind of double up that small little portion. Oh, and the other day I mentioned kind of some cool stuff on the horizon. So far it hasn't been shot down, so could still happen, and you guys will not know until the last second because it's going to be really cool and really big. So I'm excited about it. Alright, so this is going to cover up the other one here. There's a black servo here, so it didn't show through quite as bad. Now, obviously, from really up close, you're going to see that, and I'm sorry, that's life in the big city. You know, there's a limit to how much you can hide stuff on a radio-controlled airplane, and I've just come to terms with a lot of that, especially when you try to add all these features. Case in point, I chose not to do retracts on this airplane, and I've gotten a little bit of feedback from that, as though people really wanted to see retracts. Well, I did too, but retracts on this plane are super complicated, and they don't look good when you're done. I mean, they look good when you're flying by, but you're going to lose a ton of scale appearance because there's just not enough room for a regular Joe to come up with the mechanism. I've seen some guys have done it, so I know it can be done, but believe me, it doesn't look that good. And the way I figure is when this thing goes by, yes, it would be awesome to have the gear pulled up. I would love it. And so I haven't totally written it off as a possibility down the road. But right now, I'm more concerned with getting the thing to fly. You know, getting it to fly, have the features we want. Of course, you can take off and land from these just fine. And they look a heck of a lot better than they did when they were stock. So at this point, it's kind of like, it is what it is. So now you'll notice on this one I have one piece and then I allowed it to slip out at the end. That was twofold, the reason for that. One, I want this extra surface area since this is my like permanent solution. Okay, here we go. Let's try it again. Oh yeah, baby. She's working. Now the other thing is there's just clear tape holding this part. But I suppose at some point if I decided to, I could just turn around and use white tape along the bottom of that as well. I don't really have plans to do that, just so you guys know. I don't ever really intentionally keep plans from you folks. I don't really gain anything by, you know, keeping plans from you. But there are some times when I change my mind on things. I just don't want you to get the wrong idea. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it unless the plane's crashed. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do it the exact way that I originally anticipated. Because sometimes you run into problems along the way and you realize, oh boy, my plan kind of sucked. So anyway, some of these things are pretty commonsensical, but I've learned in my experience dealing with humans that some people don't have it. Alright, cool. So we've got kind of the bottom surface of the wing, you know, done-ish. For the little bit of weight that we're adding, it would be nice to kind of clean that up yet just a little bit and be done. But there's one more piece of tape that's going to go over this, and then of course over here we never did tape over that. I'll probably use vinyl electrical tape for that one because it's easier to cut a strip than it is with this. So this one, because it's so short, I could actually tape it. Now I didn't glue that in there, but when I get ready to do this, then I can go ahead and see I need to have this lifted out of my pocket, and I cut that at a steep angle just like I did on this one, so that I can tuck that. So I can tuck that wire in, potentially avoiding this carbon fiber strip. I didn't know about the carbon fiber strip and exactly where it was going to end up, but I just kind of made the decision today that that's happening. Now, normally I would use like an epoxy product to put this in, but it's just going to be a complete cluster, you know what, getting that thing in there. So I think what I might do instead is I might cut a slit, allow it to pocket in there, see if I can avoid this one. And then what's kind of cool is I was thinking I might try to tape this down when it comes out. I'm not sure. I was thinking about doing something like that because that would give me my pre-stressed look that I've been longing for. I'm just not 100% sure that's going to work. So at any rate, guys, you can see I've been thinking a lot about these different things, and I'm glad you're part of this process, but at a certain point I'm going to take ownership of it and make some decisions that maybe aren't super duper popular, but I want the pre-stressed look. I think it's going to look awesome, and I think I'm going to tape this after I glue it, but I got to cut it to length. Okay, now that's also going to give me some strength beyond where this wood spar ended, but you will see this black line. I guarantee you'll see it, because even if I tape over it or paint it or whatever, it's not going to disappear. So the cool thing is, if I tape this in a pre-stressed position and glue it with CA, then what will happen is as this wants to bend, it's going to have to pull the whole length of it. So that's going to give me my pre-stress. It's similar to when I did my ribbon coated in epoxy on this plane. Now the problem is that got very, very, very heavy. And so I learned my lesson on that. I'm not going to do that again. Well, I mean, I'll do it. I just won't do it in that same manner. I'll make sure I put less coating on. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out what I can use to cut that carbon fiber strip. Now, I had thought about actually running this in and somehow kind of running it into something else, you know, like a frame member. But if my objective is to just basically glue this and have a piece of tape, you know, hold this down until it's dry, okay, like this, I think I can get away with that without doing a big complicated process. And you see, I don't have too much more material I can even get through if I wanted to. So I think we're going to call this, good, like, I don't really need to go all the way to the end. That's just a waste of material and weight. But I'm going to have this aileron on the way, so I guess maybe I'll cut it here. Just go ahead and pull this out. Now this stuff, as you know, will shoot dust all over you, just like if you're doing insulation, because it's carbon fiber. So just be cognizant of that. So as you can see, it sprayed that stuff all over the place. And some people get a little bit sensitive of that stuff, like all human living creatures do, but I mean, some people just don't give a crap. I'll let you guess which one I am. Okay, so now I'm going to do the tip, tip, tip. So now I have this kind of like sharp edge here. Alright, cool. So now that edge will allow us to slide it in. My original plan was to go vertical with it, but I'm just going to see if I can get lucky enough to actually get this pre-stressed look that I'm after. Because this thing's already up in that pocket underneath those wires. And I can of course get those wires tucked back down later. But for now, if I want this thing to hold the wing in a pre-stressed configuration, I'm just going to grab a piece of tape and we'll temp it in there. Obviously having that, 22 inches or whatever it is of surface area, it's going to be a pretty strong CA joint. A little bit nervous, it might have a tendency of wanting to. Okay, so now I'm going to pre-stress the wing by bending it. Then I'm going to push this into the position I want it. I'm going to stick this down. Okay, so now let's go ahead and pick this thing up and just take a look at it. Obviously this wire is dropping down. I'll give you guys a look at this. So it doesn't look like it pre-stressed it very much, but there again, we haven't really gotten super proactive with it either, because it's not held back there, so it actually will just allow it to slide back out, I think. Yeah, that's all that's going to happen. So we'll have to actually turn around and get that thing glued in there. So we'll be gluing it up here on this area, and then we'll actually wait, pre-stress it, glue it out here, let the kicker set, maybe even tape it, and then come back to it. You follow? I think you do. Alright, so lots considered here. I think my next step is to go ahead and get that in there right now, because once that's done, then I can go ahead and start doing my wiring for this servo. The new servo, that is. Okay, so this end, I want it to be kind of tucked into the corner area. And normally when I do this type of gluing, I'll use a thin CA so it can run and I don't have to constantly be fighting it. You may find that using the medium CA is a lot easier. Now there's also a rubberized product that you can use that's like a tire CA. I had thought about maybe doing that. The other thing we could do is if we wanted to have some flexibility to this, we could use Formula 560 canopy glue. I just don't know if it's going to be strong enough. So we could also put mucilage on the end and slip it in there. And then we'd have two different types of glue bond. I mean, I'm certain that that wouldn't slip. I just don't want to do epoxy. Epoxy is so dang heavy, and it's such a pain in the butt. Although it would work well. So we're going to do this, and we're going to hope it doesn't just crack out right away. The cool thing is we'll be able to get back to it. If this works poorly, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so our tip is a little bit clogged up. Don't want to be fighting that while we're doing this. Hear that noise? That's the noise of success. Okay, so we're just going to let that run down the wing. Queso. That sounds good, actually. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to let that set in that spot, and we'll probably drip some kicker in there. Okay, so we want to let it get set up so that it won't release when we try to pre-stress the wing. And we want to try to avoid gluing a bunch of these wires down. Mucilage is one thing, but with a bunch of CA, you're going to end up cutting wires when you go to release it. So let's go ahead and stick this wire under here and lift these up so we can get the next little section glued. And we'll just kind of do the same thing about midway out. I mean, if a little bit of CA gets on a wire, it's not going to hurt them, but it's just, you don't want to have it totally saturated, covered, because that will cause all sorts of grief for you. Okay? You can see it just run down. Well, I don't know if you can, but I can. Now the idea is I want this to be able to flex still a little bit, but I don't want it to flex as much as it was. I just thought it looked cartoonish with the amount of dihedral that was being produced. And I know a couple of my followers are kind of big proponents of not caring about the wing flex. I kind of do on this. I think it looks stupid. Doesn't mean that it's not I mean, it's kind of a good thing to a certain extent. It gives some flexibility, is going to give you a little bit extra, you know. It's like a shot over the bow before it breaks. Also, you got to keep in mind, folks, we put these flaps in, so we did lose a little bit of strength in the wing. How much is that effect? Not much, probably. Because we cut the thinnest part of the wing, and then we replaced it with other stuff. So it's kind of more or less, I don't want to say it's a net no change, but now the other thing is going to be a Bearcat if we have to replace a servo. I'm just warning myself. But life in the big city, hence we're doing it with CA. So given the right circumstances, we should be able to get it out. Where the heck did I put my Q-tip, guys? I know I got a Q-tip, or I thought I did. I need to go get one. I think I might have grabbed it and just left it over here. That would have been super intelligent. Now, you run a Q-tip in CA, it always has a tendency of wanting to set up really quick. It just increases the surface area. Okay, cool. That's getting pretty firm now. So now I'm just gonna kind of run that. Now you notice I'm not even like trying to embed this at all. I'm just literally gonna sit here and hold it for a minute. I'm just gonna lift some of the weight. Once I get it to hold, then I can let go, and then I can use the pre-stress from the carbon fiber to hold. You're probably wondering, why didn't you cut a pocket? Well, because I'm bridging this weird gap here. We're going to see. This might not work with the crap, guys. There are things that I try that don't work. Usually I'm so stubborn that I'll eventually make it work no matter what, but this is feeling like it might work if I could get this stuff to cure in time. It's totally going to glue myself to this plane. I can feel it. It's going to happen. I just don't know if it's going to happen right away or if it's going to happen like in a few minutes. Remember, we're going to eventually be dependent on tape too. You can tell it's really hot, so it's working. Oh, buddy, it's held. It's held now. I'm just afraid it's not probably held super hard yet. So now a little bit more CA. And when I say a little, I mean kind of a lot. Okay, I want to dam it up down here, so wherever the the CA wants to flow, I want to kind of build a little impromptu dam with kicker. Now I've also read, I don't know if I trust or believe the source, but I've read that this stuff will soak up the CA if you use thin CA. I don't know if I believe it, but I'm going to try it real quick. And I think you'd have to probably have it penetrate on the end of the stick. Guys, look at that. It's pulling the wing down. Whoops. I hit this Phoenix all the time, where I decided to hang it. That's one problem we're having right now in the house, in the Brian Phillips house. We're running out of room on airplane stuff, that's for sure. Okay, so now you just got to be careful you don't take up all the room that you had or need for housing the wires, because there are going to be some wires that need to be housed in there. I've got enough CA in there, I just want to spray it for that area. Alright guys, so I want to give you guys a quick look at this before we call it quits for this video. But truthfully, I think I'm going to just go ahead and run this one long like I've been doing lately. And so we'll come right back to this. Alright folks, this is part 2 of part 4. Continuing part 4. Alright, let's pull these screwdrivers out. Let's go lay this down and see how that pre-stress worked. I really hope it worked at least a little bit. I'm not going for exact perfection on any of this stuff, guys. But I mean, I want it to be at least worthwhile, otherwise I'll just take the stinking thing out. Okay, so let's also hope that my CA is set up enough to not like run all over my counter. That would be an immediate doghouse movement. Now, you guys see that pre-stress? It goes down. This one just kind of goes straight out. And so when this gets pulled up, it's unobstructed, it just goes. This one here, it's going to have to fight the carbon fiber rod. And I mean, really, that pre-stress movement would be down here. So it would go like up at a dihedral, and then it would bend here. But that is pretty good. I can live with that. That's a good compromise. It's a heck of a lot better than gouging a whole slot in this trying to do that. And that was fairly easy to do. Oh, real quick while we're in here, see this? This is the original servo wire that goes to the spoiler servo. And as you can see, there's no damage or anything up here. Let's give you guys a shot of it working with it upright. I have my burner right in the middle of the floor. That's super convenient. Alright, here goes nothing. Aileron. Aileron. See just a little bit of deployment. Flaps. Landing flaps. That's full deployment. Down. That is looking really good. I like it. I'm happy with that. Okay, so now the next maneuver, and to be perfectly honest with you, that shape, that mimics a lot closer the actual look of the plane. So, the only thing I don't know yet on that is if it's going to adversely impact the straightforward flight, because it might be twisting a little bit. We'll see. I doubt it. I think it's probably going to fly just as good as it did before, because that limited difference in dihedral is just inconsequential. But that looks a lot more like a real one than this. Alright, guys, I know you think, Brian, you're nuts. It looked fine before. No, it didn't. It didn't look fine before. Look, this is under stress of flight. Okay, it's flat. It never goes up. And here, this guy's on the ground. Look at that sweep. Okay, I know you believe me, but some of you are going to say it looked fine. No superior. That's all I've got to say. So we can disconnect this spoiler, okay, which is going to allow me to detach this Y cable, which is going to allow me to leave that off to the side. Now we can go ahead while we're upside down, or right side up rather. We can plug back in this servo connection, okay, which is just going to allow the aileron to work. This is off now, so we can go ahead and solder that in, which means our next step is going to require us to unplug, so we might as well unplug that. Let's do this so that cable dangles, so we preferably trip over it and destroy all our work to save the 30 seconds it would have taken to do 2 trips. Good call, me. I'm sure you guys have all been there, so I trust that you guys will get a chuckle out of the fact that I'm doing that same stupid thing that every one of you at home does, which is, hey, I could carry this over in 2 trips, which would take 30 seconds longer, or I could risk the entire investment of time I've got to save the extra 30 seconds. Yep. Not probably the brightest moment. Okay, so we're going to disconnect this extension cord, which happens to have a clip on it. So that's no longer needed. Okay, this little Y cable and extension cord. And I've got the other Hex Tronics. In case you guys don't know anything about these Hex Tronic Servos, it's just like a Hobby King product, super cheap. You can get them all over the place. To be perfectly honest, I'd probably recommend you use the servo that we use for the flaps, because it's a lot better. It's a lot higher quality servo. But you know what? There's a time and place for a light servo. There really is, and you need to take advantage when you can. Alright, so we're going to glue and reinforce that joint a little bit more. This time we're going to go ahead and use gap filling medium CA, because we don't need to necessarily have it flow. Just saying that makes me think, you sound like you're full of crap, Brian, so I'm going to go ahead and just do it with thin, and stop being such a cheapskate on this. Also, I'm going to shut that off, because I don't have power on this at the moment. So remember, we kind of reinforced here, and you can see the CA all over this. Now we're just going to do like up here, just make sure we kind of miss that one servo wire. We don't have any interest in getting tons and tons of glue over the servo wires like we talked about earlier. Okay, so we'll just run this down. Just kind of let it flow. You know? And like I said, a little bit of glue on the side of that is not going to be a big deal. You just don't want to cover it completely. That will cause grief for you. And this is kind of an expensive thing, but keep in mind, epoxy is not free either. I know some of you are probably thinking, it's CA, it's not that expensive. Yeah, it adds up, man. When you buy a lot of it, it's expensive. And I do. Think of all the crashes I've had, guys. I go through CA constantly. I just had that happen the other day. I went to the hobby store thinking, yeah, I need this, that, and the other thing. I had like 4 things on my list. Next thing you know, I got 2 purchases because I forgot everything on the second one for the first purchase. I spent over $100 on stuff that I haven't even used yet. That's just... Oh, see this? See this? I got these wires are getting somewhat stuck together here. Yeah, I glued my thumb. I hate it when that happens. I'll have to use acetone now. But I don't really want to have these red wires all glued together like that much. I don't mind, like I said, a little bit on the side is not a big deal, but having them completely encapsulated in CA is not acceptable. Okay, good enough. That's probably fine now. Yeah, I think we're good now. Alright, so that should really strengthen that. So now I need to cover this up. You're probably thinking to yourself, Brian, this does not look like a spoiler mod to me. Holy crappers. That glue came out of there. You see this? the glue ran all the way down here. That is super annoying. Watch this, guys. I'm going to just come in here. I'm going to just get rid of it. If I can. Are you kidding me? That is so frustrating. So annoying and frustrating. Ooh. Don't get your blade dirty. Comes back to, you know, just keeping a clean tip, you know. Clean your tip. That sucks. I'm not happy about that. Kind of annoying. Usually when you get glue that runs like that, you can almost always just break it out. Because you see it's just one little row that goes like this. And I really want it to be gone because it's not serving any purpose. So I'm going to try to get it to go bye-bye. I think part of my problem is it's semi-soft still. Just that'll make it really hard to cover the servo and make it look neat. Ooh, maybe I can get this edge. There we go, there we go. Yes! Good enough. Okay. Crisis averted, guys. So now, I don't remember how much kicker I put in this area, but I'm just going to put a little bit more in there. I just want to make sure it's totally set up. One thing about kickers, you'll cure the outside and you'll make a case, and then you'll literally go back a couple of days later and the stuff in the middle will not be cured. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. I've had it happen to me before. I used a lot more kicker in those days. Son of a gun. I'm glad it wasn't opened. Okay, so I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna let that cook for a minute. And the only thing I really need to get done next is to tape over this outboard portion. But to be honest with you, I kind of need to tape over a bunch of it. So maybe I'll come back to that and I can tape over everything all at once, kind of at the end, in case I think of something else I need to do. Let's get the soldering iron cooking. Soldering iron needs to be warm because we're going to be connecting these wires here together now. Okay, so now, how do you determine where to cut the wire? Good question, me. I don't know. It's up to you. Here's how I determine where to cut the wire. Where I determine to cut the wire is where this servo is going to be able to easily accommodate this wire, okay? Now the other thing is, as you know, when I do my LEDs, many times I will tap this wire to run my LEDs. In this case, it's probably not going to be like that. Here's why. These are going to have a solid, just a normal nav light, which would be like red and green. Red is right returning. Somebody told me that. Whoever you are, you know who you are. Thank you. Red is right returning, so the red would be on the right side of the plane returning, so it would be over there. So if it was facing toward me and it was coming at me, that would be red. So this one would be green, and then there'd be a strobe that's white. And so those are going to be controlled by a controller. So whatever I do here is going to end up being preferably my temporary stuff that I had before. Okay? 10,000 foot view. I know it's not, you know, super important, but it is an issue. I sort of would like to hold this down with tape just to protect it. I'll come back to it. I'm just going to resist the temptation. So let's go ahead and do this while our soldering iron's getting hot. So sometimes you just got to cut it and just get on with it. I'm a classic waffler. You guys may have noticed. like if you watched one video. I'm talking about delicious waffles. I'm talking about not making up my mind. I struggle with making that final decision, you know. Sometimes I do good. Sometimes I'm horrible at it. Just depends on the day. Okay, so that kind of sucks too. You see what I did to myself here, guys? See, that's what happens to mucilage when you put kicker on it. It breaks down. Okay, so I'm going to very gently walk this away from the CA together, okay? So that I don't damage the silicone layer. Because if you damage the silicone layer there, you're going to have a heck of a time. You'll have to peel it out and rewire a bunch of stuff, okay? Okay, so we're just separating that wire. Ooh, see, it's wanting to start doing that, exactly what I was talking about. So get your flat screwdriver and go the other direction. Alright, so now the rationale behind doing this is so that we can get this tucked in eventually. Right now it's just going to want to sit on the surface, okay? It's going to be a big mess. You'll have a heck of a time getting that to flatten out. There we go. Okay, cool. So those are in there. Now we do need this slack so that we can tap into those wires. But you see what I'm talking about, these 3 red wires. If they're too long, you'll have all sorts of grief getting those things to sit down in the bottom of the channel. So go through the trouble now while the CA is still evidently curing a little bit, and just get them pulled tight. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was really concerned about getting those things to lay down flat. Okay, so now you remember I was talking about not wanting to use like a bunch of CA on this stuff? Well, I would say that I still definitely agree with that theory, but I need this stuff to stay down and out of my way because it's kind of getting annoying fighting it. So I'm going to actually use mucilage. Okay, so the hot water we used the other day evidently worked, but only temporarily. Meaning that when we allowed it to cool down, I don't know if you guys saw that in the video, but when it was allowed to cool down, it just more or less went back to its original shape and resistance to being useful at life. See, this one's trying to separate here too. What a joke. Alright guys. But this is the material I want to use, so I'm going to be more stubborn than the glue. I just need a little bit. Okay, I got the microwave warming up the water. The mucilage is winning today on this battle. I'm going to win the war, but the mucilage is winning the battle. So, is what it is. Okay, so I'm going to just strip these 3 wires. And then we're going to grab this little piece that fell down in here. Get it out of there. And then we have to decide exactly where we want to tap. Now, we don't have as much excess as you would like if you have to do this. Because you don't ever really want to have to do this. This is just kind of a one method. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this knife and just go between the brown and the red here. Not that there's anything magical about the brown and the red right there. It just happens to be the first one that I wanted to separate. And then I'm going to go between the red and the orange, or the yellow, if you will. Okay, so we've got those three separated now. And so in my experience, the easiest way to do this with mitigating the risk of having a short circuit is to, of course, do the splices at different spots. Sometimes that gets a little bit hairy, so just be aware if that's what your plan is. Use the stripper to open it up, but don't actually cut the wire. Grab your sharp X-Acto knife. Get in here with the tip. Spin it. Okay, once it's spun, you should have a bit of an opening there. Go ahead and twist your wires up to make it neat. Feed it through. Fold it back. And that's all she wrote, right there. Now you can solder that. Okay. Clean your tip, guys. Clean tips work better. They work longer. Normally I wouldn't solder just one, but I'm going to solder this one because it's in a perfect shape. Okay, now we move on. And yes, it's a bit of a tedious thing because you have to do this for, here it's going to be 6 wires, but life in the big city, I guess, right? So now, the red and the brown, same exact method. We're going to try to splice them at different spots, if it's possible. The understanding that you really don't want to short any of them, but red and black you definitely do not want to short. Okay, because that's your positive and negative. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit of this tape. Doesn't really matter what color. All we're doing is isolating these from one another. Okay. So we'll push that down hard and then roll it. So it's going to give us a little bit of a structural strength to the cable as well, beyond the strength of the actual solder joint. Okay, so this water should be like super duper hot. Now we can get the mucilage and just put it in for a dip, and then watch how much better it works. Sure, it's nice and toasty. Yeah, it's a little hot. This is dry. See the steam coming out? This is going to be nuts. Okay. There you go. So we're going to let that heat up. I just lost one of my 10-year bulbs. That's always awesome. Right there. Gotta love it. Gotta love it, guys. LEDs. LEDs, everybody talks about how awesome they are. Light doesn't quite look as good to me. And they're a lot more expensive. I mean, it's one thing on an airplane, but my incandescent lights look so much better in this house. And so I've switched over a bunch of these to LEDs. And they're supposed to last like virtually forever. This one here has decided it's like, I'm not going to work anymore, see? It's just kind of like halfway on. That's super annoying. Because those things are expensive. I think that was like 15 bucks or something. Okay. Again, life in the big city. Ooh, that's getting super soft. Nice. So we're just going to let that warm up quite a bit. And once it's warm, we should be able to put our tool in there. Get a little bit of this mucilage out. Oh yeah, the hot stuff is just gone to the bottom there. Jeez. It's like butter. Look at that. It's extremely hot though. It seems to almost repel the water. So I'm going to just go like crazy and just put it in this way. Need the surface area to transfer the heat. Okay. Alright, here we go. So a little water might come out, that'll be fine. There it goes. There it goes. Wish I could transfer this to another container or something and allow it to keep this suppleness. Alright, so these wires here, we can go ahead and finally get some mucilage on. Pull the 3 wires away from the nacelle. Of course, these are feeding this EDF here. See, this is why I like mucilage, because it's not a lot of work. It's super easy. Wasn't I talking about how much easier it is than epoxy the other day? Well, I think this might have actually been harder than epoxy. Okay, remember this mucilage, it works well, and you can always change your mind later and go ahead and run some kicker on it, and it will break down the adhesive, so it'll work nicely for removability as well. Okay. Alright, so now red. Peel it back. Take the knife. Evidently there's kind of like a minimum amount that you have to have exposed, or it's not going to allow you to open it up. So now when this one's done, obviously I need to get the other side done. And I'm toying with the possibility, the prospect of how much of that I'd like to cover, because you guys have seen so much of this process. I guess it's going to depend on how late it gets, because tomorrow may be a possible maiden attempt day. And so if we're getting late, I want to hurry and get it done so you guys can see this thing. But at the same time, you know, you've invested all this time watching, so I hate to take away from you a part of it that you might want to see. Okay, so that solder will hold that just fine. We're going to let that cool for a minute. Now the brown I'm going to do right in the middle. For maximum short circuit probability. Just kidding, guys. Now when we're all done with this, we'll probably go ahead and put a little teeny bit of glue over this whole kit and caboodle. And what that will do for us is give us the ability to have some peace of mind that it's not going to short out on us beyond the little bit of tape that we put there. Sometimes I use hot glue. Sometimes I use CA. Okay, so got that there. This has kind of been a long project, guys. And it's not even done yet, jeez. Think about it. I've still got a lot of work left on like LEDs and stuff. That's going to be extremely tedious. Now that can stay unplugged. We're not going to be doing it again for a while. Alright, so we need to tape those. Let's go for the same style. I've got this vent going to suck some of that air away from me, that toxic gas from soldering. Mostly concerned about setting the smoke alarm off, because I always put the smoke alarm back when I'm done with my painting or whatever. About the time I think I'm going to get away with not setting it off, it goes off at 2 in the morning or whatever, and just brings the whole family together. Real positive environment. Alright, so you guys are kind of getting the idea of how this is going to work now. It's as though I have a Y cable, servo signal cable splitter, but of course I don't actually have to split the signal now. It's just split right there. Okay, so now we can tuck this back down in, get that seated. Looks like some glue might have filled in our cavity to a certain extent. So I'll grab a flat-bladed screwdriver. Just, yeah, definitely got a little bit of CA in there. Not a big deal. Just knock it out of there. Don't forget to wipe your tip. A clean tip is an important step in life. You always want to wipe it off. Okay, so now this excess can be kind of cable managemented. See how nice that looks? It's just total cluster. Yeah, that was probably not the nicest look I've ever gotten out of a wire splice, but who cares? As long as I can get it to flatten out before we cover it back up, that's all I really care about. It's not impossible that I would try to run my nav lights off of that, but being that we're running 2 servos and all that jazz on there, it's probably a good idea to not do that, of course. See, this mucilage is being kind of a pain in the butt. See, it's already getting hard again. And evidently the label is going to be picky too, and it's going to be like, no, you can't dunk me in water and make me stay on here. I beg to differ. Stupid top is going to come out again. Alright guys, so you get the right idea. So just going to get enough of this that we can do where these wires are all kind of contorted all over themselves. Because like I said, this is one of my favorite methods for bonding, even though it's a pain in the butt to do. Because you've got that flexibility to undo it later. Which, I mean, what other secure bond can you undo later? It's pretty uncommon. And it's actually quite secure, as long as you don't get a bunch of kicker in there. And that becomes the next problem. Like, if you plan on getting a bunch of kicker in there, you probably don't want to use this stuff. Not unless you don't mind if it's loose at that point. It's like, for instance, I was going to glue a cap on this. I wouldn't maybe care by the time I'm done gluing it, right? So you could get away with that. Okay. Alright, so everything is where it needs to be. We got our pre-stress in there. And this will just stick in with the other glued up tips for mucilage. Then we're going to go give this a, and we're just going to, this is part 3, guys, of part 4. Of course, it makes perfect sense, I know, but we're just going to let that sit in the hot tub. Hot tub for a while, let that mucilage think about what it's done. Alright, so now that we have that all taken care of, now this last little bit of wires either needs to be pulled in or somehow otherwise managed, because I don't want to have to trip over it the whole time I'm working on this plane, potentially catching it and damaging something. But at the same time, we probably do need to test that wire that we just fixed or re-spliced together. So let's go ahead and fire this up. Make sure your radio system's on. Gotta wait for this on a DX18. Or most of the Spectrum stuff. Okay. Yep, working. Awesome. Alright, cool. So, we've tested that, so we should be able to go ahead and jump over to the wiring covers, because we're hypothetically going to be done inside of here now. And we had all this managed before, of course. It was just ever since we had to get to these wires, we allowed it to become messy again. Okay, so it seems like we'll be able to get everything through just fine. Might have to kind of hold this thing upside down. Oh geez. See where those wires come in there, guys? It's going to be awkward as all get out to pull on those things. So I think our only recourse is to use mucilage. Have you had a chance to figure out what you want to do with yourself here in mucilage? Yes. Okay, good. Sounds like it's going to behave now. It's decided to be totally limp now. Kids do that too. It's like, you know, hey, get over here, kid. They just kind of fall on the floor limp. Not my kids. They're perfect. Just kidding. They're good kids. As soft as this tube is, it's kind of the way it is when it's brand new. So it's all exciting because it makes me think, well, it's going to stay this way. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be like good old times. But then 10 minutes later, it gets old and crappy. So I'm just going to do a trick that you guys have probably not seen before, except for in your bathroom. And you've been doing it for most of your life. But I'm going to roll up the tube of toothpaste now here. I mean, mucilage. And that'll make it a lot easier to not have to worry about the bottom blowing out on me. Now we just have to worry about the top blowing out on me. Feels a little bit like I can't win on this particular step. This mucilage is just waiting to blow up in my hands for extra excitement and theatrical value. Okay. So we're just going to slather that there. Spread that around a little bit. Probably going to be running out of battery here pretty soon, guys. So we may end up kind of having to call it quits on the videos for tonight, or at least for a while until I can charge this thing back up. But for now, my predominant concern is to try to get this whole side done. And then, being as you've seen most of the steps, I mean, cutting a pocket's not exactly rocket science. I am very tempted to just do it. Then you guys can kind of see what it looks like when it's all done and awesome. Okay, so I've got that one pesky red wire that needs to be pulled through. Now, if you get the stuff on your fingers, work it off right away. Don't try to come back to it, because it'll be really, really hard to get off later. You can actually get it off later, but you'll have to use kicker accelerator to actually get that stuff out of there. Okay, so that pulled some of it through. Gosh, which stinking red wire do I need to yank on? It's one of them, for sure. There's only 3, and I yanked on all of them. I don't know if you guys can tell what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to do whatever I'm doing without declaring defeat and allowing it to rip, which is what will tend to happen if you're not careful using forceps on stuff like this. Oh, I think I figured out what's going on. I must have got a little bit of CA on there. Okay, so earlier when I was gluing this this carbon fiber rod in, I think I got a little CA on there, so that's why it's not wanting to feed through. Now it's feeding through just fine. Okay, cool. See that? It's just totally going to blow up in my hand. I just know it. So, I finally had my Hobby King order shipped. I don't know what magic words I said or didn't say, but they decided it would be, you know, my order was worthy of shipping since it only been like 20 days or whatever it was. I was not real terribly thrilled about that. And see, then I've got to wait for it to actually get here still, of course. That's one of the big drawbacks with Hobby King, is their customer service just sucks badly. It's like you're an inconvenience to them. The hobby community, that is, to Hobby King. But I know they've been going through some stuff, and they need to figure it out, I guess. So, one of these days. Okay, so the bottom of this tube, one thing that has helped me in the past is if you can just slap a piece of tape under like that, that'll hold that, so it's a little bit easier. Alright, cool. So, the next step, of course, is to cover that, so we'll get going on that right away. Alright, so I kind of wanted to accomplish this one wing and just have it done. So what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and just get this taped over. And if this fails, it's not the end of the world. I mean, certainly I want it to succeed, but if it does fail, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to take some alcohol. And I like to keep the labels from my servos, too, I was just going to say. These servos, this Hex Tronic Servos, and what I do is as I'm building the plane, or putting together the kit, or whatever it is, I will just kind of keep a pile of bags so I don't have to search for stuff later, in case I change it or decide to do it a different way. Okay, so brand new fresh paper towel so that there's no dry CA on it. We're going to get this wet with alcohol. we're going to just clean off this surface here, okay? Because obviously we need to clean the surface to allow our tape to bond properly. And Kicker will, as you know, from either listening to me or doing it yourself, the Kicker will prevent that good adhesion. Okay. So now I didn't take this off on purpose. It's just kind of the way it worked out. I would have left that on the other side, or I would have left it on, but it just happened to come off. Okay, so now that that's all peeled off, like I said, I would love to be able to just reuse what I've got. Oh, is that even the right one? Nope, that's the one from over here. I didn't know which way they were, so I just stuck them. Okay, so I'm getting my 15% warning on my phone. So what I'll do is I'll just work as quick as I can, and they'll probably be very reluctantly part 4 as well on this. Part 4 of 4. Part 4 of part 4. And what that's going to be is just the quick follow-up when I'm done with the other side. Okay, so when we peeled that off before, like a few days ago or whenever we started this whole endeavor, I knew that I was possibly going to reuse it, but I didn't know for sure. I didn't really do it slappy or anything, but I like the way it worked good enough that I'm going to do it again. But I don't want to use this super heavy tape, this nicer tape. I want to actually use a thinner tape, because this stuff, although this might help a little bit with the strength of the underside of the wing. So yeah, we'll go ahead and use this heavier stuff this time. Not 100% sure how I'm going to do my whole design setup for my LEDs, which is a very big factor when it comes to these covers. Now the cool thing is these were paper, or are paper still, but now they have a clear piece of tape, so I should be able to delaminate this like that, you see, which is kind of cool. So if I don't get a perfect seat, I can try again. Okay, so I'm just going to stick this down, doubling that up, because I'm having a heck of a time getting it located properly. Alright, so I can just stick that down just like that. And now that it's centered nicely, one side needs to have quite a bit of overlap, and then the other side doesn't need to have quite a bit of overlap. The one side that needs the more overlap is the side that's actually going to end up being riding up the wing root. And yes, there is a difference, and no, I don't know. So I gotta guess and check until I get it right. So now this side needs to be trimmed down to virtually nil, like that. Alright guys, there's our access cover. I wouldn't exactly describe that as an axis, because it's kind of like the counter axis. Now when I come back to do this again, I'll just know to do it that way so we don't have the problems. Although we could try to get away with just re-sticking this, because this was just pulled off this evening. So we'll try that quick. And if it doesn't work, no big deal. Notice that there's a piece that needs to go here. I'll just put it on top. See how it's all bubbly and crappy looking? That would usually be your sign to not reuse this without trimming off the tape again. But I think I'm just going to try to flatten it out and see if it looks good. If it doesn't, I can use the my iron to take out some of those bumps too. I think for now we're probably fine. Remember, this is where we have a ridiculous thing, so it may never sit down exactly the same as it was. Now this one is going to be a little bit different because we are able to reuse this piece of vinyl here if we wanted, but the whole servo pocket is actually a little bit different now due to the simple fact that we're continuing out. Now we're not actually bonded to the servo there, okay? So this is where we need to use the heavier. That part went back down without a problem, so I'm totally fine with that. I want to use that white duct tape for this part. The white duct tape is going to need to be trimmed down some. But I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just try to cut it big enough. It's kind of tempting to just redo that whole piece. But there again, it's kind of tempting to not. So I'm not going to do it. I'll come back and add it later if I need to. This is some really thick stuff, so I know it's going to be nice and strong, but it's very heavy. So, you know, if you guys are thinking about getting this for covering up servo channels, you're going to want to trim it down in half. Okay? So now, you're noticing what I'm going to do here is going to be potentially a conflict, and that is I've got to deal with cutting this. So I'm intentionally leaving it to not be pressed down so that I can trim right around where the aileron is. Okay? So obviously we can't have that touching the aileron because the aileron has this relief which allows it to move free of the frame. Okay? So now this is pushed down here and pushed down tight and pushed down here and really got a good secure footing there. But now we have to do kind of the same thing here. Go ahead and trim it here. Now we need to cut straight across. Alright guys, sorry my battery actually did run out there. So we got this piece of tape here. And we just cut it and then just formed it around this aileron so that it's free to move. We did one little strip here, and then we did one little strip here. And so, I mean, while it's not perfect, it's got kind of the panel liney look that a real airliner would have. Now we've got that little bit of pre-stress. It's kind of hard to see from this angle, but you'll see it when it's righted. For now, anyway, that's about it on part 4. Now I've just got to do all that same stuff over here. The only complication will be, of course, we have to take off this FWDD, which I've put a piece of clear tape over. And so I should be able to peel that off and then reapply it. So guys, thanks a lot for watching. Sorry about the video running out, or the battery. So come back for more. I think you'll like the finished outcome. And the reason we're kind of pushing a little bit on videos tonight is, like I mentioned earlier, we want to try to get them made in tomorrow. So I hope to actually clip into this video here a little bit later, and we'll give you a total final, everything working. It's going to look sweet. Brian Phillips here. This will be like a continuation of part 4. I never did actually show you guys how to cut this in, so we're going to do that right now. Since we know where it goes, it's really easy. We can just count in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then it's halfway between here. You see this? Now we know we're going to have to gain access to all this stuff, so we can go ahead and pull up this cover. And we're also going to put in that pre-stress with the carbon fiber rod, or the carbon fiber strip, I would think is what you actually call it, since it's flat. So we're going to peel this up. Hopefully we won't have to take the... Oh, good. Yeah, we're not touching the electrical tape on this side as much. So I can peel it without that. And if we play our cards right, we can... Ooh, I just want to make sure I don't confuse those two. It'd be hard to keep them straight. Okay, so now this has got tape over it, so we'll be peeling that off as well. And that's just part of it. And if it comes up poorly, then I'll have to just go through the process of making a new one, which would be unfortunate. Now, I'm tempted to just go ahead and cut the servo cable and just do it right away to save some time. Because like I was saying, we're sort of tight on time because tomorrow we've got an opportunity to potentially maiden or remaiden. Okay. And I really want to take advantage. Okay, so this ripped, so that's a bummer. Not the end of the world, but it's kind of annoying. So I'm going to try to get this peeled up from the other side there. Remember, if this doesn't work well, we've got that white duct tape that would work fine. But this will get our exact placement. So we're just going to try to put it back down exactly as it was. And then if we have to redo it, we can redo it. But I can avoid having to redo it if we have good success. Okay, great. So as you can see, we got the mucilage here holding this down, and this just looks nice and tidy. We're going to do the exact same thing we did before, so this will just need to be available. So the first step, of course, is going to be to go ahead and make sure we have a path. Okay. And then back here, we don't have any glue until about here. And then we'll just kind of peel that back. Okay. Actually went a lot smoother on that side. We know we need to cut the servo pocket, so we can go ahead and grab the servo, which is like, again, just a Hex Tronic 9-gram servo. Real popular. This is the part number if you're buying it from Hobby King. Comes with a variety of different styles of control horns. In our case, we're going to be using the single direction. And then we'll make a custom end. Now I don't know which direction this is going to go yet, so we're not going to throw the screw in. And so for that reason, I'm trying to think. We know for sure we're going to do this the same way. So it's more a matter of, I just need to make sure I stick the servo in the right direction. So it should be going this direction. We know we don't want these labels on there. So you can peel those off. It's always easier to do this stuff once you've kind of figured out your approach to getting it accomplished. I don't want to be fighting this cable, so 1, 2, 3, between 3 and 4. So 1, 2, 3, between 3 and 4. And it should sit like this, and it'll point that direction, hypothetically, if we are going to be able to do it the exact same way. So the last time I did it, I used a Y cable, and then I used an extension cord. I think just to be on the safe side in case there's something maybe wrong with the servo, why don't we go ahead and just flip this thing over and test it. Make sure everything works. So we're just gonna pick this up a little bit. Whoops. There's so many planes above me here, it can be a little bit awkward. Okay, so this is one aileron here we were working on before. That makes this the other aileron. You can tell by where the wire passes through. There's only one wire that's that color. Okay. And the way that I separated them, might as well just put that on the ground. The way that I separated them before is I used a hot blade. Just heat this knife up. Once it's nice and toasty, we'll come in here and just melt the hot glue. Okay, once the hot glue is melted, we can peel that out. Sometimes that's a good time to just grab that older hot glue, because you'll refresh that later. You just get it off of there, because it's nice and soft. Actually get it off a little cleaner if you do it after it's dry or cool, whichever way you want to look at it. Okay, so this is our other aileron, because we have flaperon set up. Originally, when we started this project, I thought I was going to do just two ailerons, and it didn't work. I couldn't get it to work properly, so I switched my configuration to flaperons, and then that resolved largely my problems, or the particular problems I was dealing with. One thing I noticed too, this tape is separating over here, so I have to poke a hole and put a little CA or something in there to hold it down. Okay, so we have this plugged in now, so we're going to flip it over, and we'll just flip it over like this so that we can lay that receiver in there. And we'll just plop this around. Need to make sure that we have the transmitter on. Make sure this light's on solid. Solid, and you're on the right airplane before you plug it in. Okay. Alright, cool. So now, aileron. Okay, so it's working. I can feel it moving. Now, when I was doing my original diagnostics, I built this little adapter that held this onto a longer one. That gave me a little something to test with. So I want to mimic this. Unlike the flaps, which are mounted in, flap servos are mounted in two different positions. Not necessarily the way I prefer to do it, but it's just kind of the way it worked out. These ones will actually mount them the same way. So between 1, 2, 3, and the 4th is where this is going to go. So it's essentially going to be centered right here. Okay. And as we push the aileron down, or we deploy the aileron, that's gonna push down, and it's gonna push into the spoilers. Okay, so it's going the right direction. So really, at this point, it just becomes a matter of going ahead and transferring, making sure we've got it where we want it to be. So on this one, we have the edge of the servo right at the edge here. So we want to do that, and we want to just double check. Looks like we're pretty well centered. So we're just going to take, and I'm just going to press really hard into this, and I'm just going to kind of rock it. And that's going to transpose a little bit of a mark onto the foam. Now, of course, you could trace it or do a variety of other functions, like marking it. In our case, that's not going to be the best option because I don't want to see the markings. Okay, then we're just going to go in and trace it with a knife so we can cut the hole. Sometimes it's hard to see until you lay it back down. Ooh. That is a little bit different configuration. See, this needs to be a little bit closer to the edge. I wonder if I need to go back just a hair. Yeah, I'm going to go back just a hair. Hope I don't kick myself for that later. But okay. And so I'm just kind of cutting a shallow cut here. But just so you know, you're going to end up cutting out most of the material, almost all the way down to the top, which is the underside here now, since we're upside down. Almost to the top of the wing. And that's an important realization, because as you cut, you want to cut fairly deep. When I first initially did this, I thought, boy, I'm going to bottom out. Well, yeah, you pretty much want to, because you want this thing to be closer to the top of the wing when you're all said and done. Okay, so once you get that cut made, you want to go ahead and start making your diagonal cuts or whatever it is you'd like to do to get that middle part out. I usually cut at a 45. Then I'll come back in and I'll cut at a 45. And then I'll come back in here and cut at a 45. And then I'll just kind of lay the knife aside for now. And I'll usually do this part with forceps. And I like to have a little box to lay all this crap in, because it ends up being a lot of it when you're digging out a whole servo. Okay, so just go through and rip it out. Because you cut at 45s, you'll end up with some loose pieces, which will kind of help you to lower the height down, okay, to almost the bottom of the depth there. Okay, so now when you get down, I would say, whoa, see, that was a little too much. What I did last time was pretty simple. I just used a 20,000 shim and some hot air. Always got to be mindful of what's overhead when you do this. It's kind of nice. Cold in the basement now, so it feels kind of nice. Okay, now I should probably go ahead and cut this fan on. And I just do this little crosshatch pattern. It just kind of evens out the surface to a degree. And then you can do that a couple of times usually, and you've got a pretty good spot to receive that servo then. You can get it nice and toasty. what that does is it will collapse the foam, so you still have quite a bit of strength there, which is obviously going to be a lot different than if you were to just remove it completely. So you'll find that this method works quite well, and you'll spill your stuff on the floor. Okay, so that's probably about where we need it. So now, let's do our test fit. First thing I'm noticing is that we have no exit for the wire. And the second thing I'm noticing is we have nowhere for this to fall down into. Okay? You'll notice over on this other side, we had to remove a little bit of material to give it a spot. Okay? So what I'm going to do first is I'll go ahead and make my exit for the cable. We're going to go more or less straight, but we're going to cut at a 45-degree angle. And we're going to do the same exact thing again in close proximity, as much as you can get away with freehand. We're going to take a flat-bladed screwdriver and just pull that little plug out. Okay. So that's going to hypothetically give us a pocket to drop down into if we cut it big enough, which it kind of seems like right now maybe we're not quite deep enough. We need to go a little bit deeper here. But it's a little easier now because you can get in there and actually cut both axes. Before it was tricky because you couldn't really get in there and cut the material out. You kind of had to sort of hint at it, you know. You can really get in there and cut it out. Alright. So this fell over, but it didn't all fall out, so that's kind of cool. I have a spot where I keep that stuff. Okay, so now we need to relieve a little bit of material so that we have room for this servo to fit. Now you're probably wondering why I'm doing this first instead of doing the carbon fiber strip first. Well, I had a couple of different reasons for that. Mostly I just want to make sure things line up right first before I get too worried. I'm not going to glue that in until I'm done, you know. And then this isn't actually the finished setup that we're going to do. We'll actually take that out and we'll build one like we did over here, which is a bent rod that goes back and forth and then out. But this is our gauge for the length. Okay. We can at least have an idea of how big we need to, you know, how big of a clearing we need by stuffing this down in there. I really hated to do this on the other side. It made me nervous I was going to lose some aerodynamic capabilities. Which is probably true. I mean, in terms of the flap performance. I really hate to do that, but kind of got to do what you got to do sometimes. Okay, so let's see if we can get that in there now. It looks like we're going to have to take a little bit out of this corner here as well. Let's take that knife almost down to the bottom of the corner. And then virtually all the way down here. Just knock it out. Alright, cool. So we basically have that to where it'll drop down. But we still don't have quite enough clearance here. We're very close, but we're not quite there. Okay. And that's why we don't want to land those wires right away, because I'm going to use that. It's going to be in and out a few times before we're totally done. So this is basically what we did the first time. Got to keep that rubber band stuff. That stuff actually worked really good. I'm surprised how good it worked. I mean, I expected it to work decent or I wouldn't have done it, but sometimes things work a little better than decent. You're pleasantly surprised. Okay, so let's make our other piece. I'll see if I can extend this so you can see it. So it's kind of got that hook. Okay. So we can unplug this, shut this off, and we're going to bend that right now. So this is a regular 1mm rod, and this is a KS Precision Metals stock number 497. 0.039 music wire, which is also known as 1mm. This is the same stuff exactly, it just happens to have a different collar, so I'm going to use it first. Okay, so I think I got my melting done for now, so I can put that away. That thing was actually what we used initially to kick up the inboard air brakes. Alright, so here's what we're doing here. This is going to operate just like this, except it's going to be just the metal rod, so that we have less material that's being dragged around on the plane to do the same function. So I think the way we did it was we went in through the bottom and then back out through the top. So it was like this. Then you can grab this with your needle nose pliers and then allow it to come back out, rotate it around so you get your grip in the right spot, and you can make your bend back. Okay. So now at this point it's easiest to just grab the end of it and just feed it through the entire length. And this just makes it so that you pretty much have an extension of the control rod, or the servo horn rather. Oh, I always mix up those terminology for some stupid reason. I'm gonna grab some safety glasses. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now we can slip this back in here. And for your records, I did actually try this without. I tried it without, just using the regular piece here. Just wasn't quite enough deflection to impact change as desired. I'm going to keep this as tight as possible, because this is where you're going to need to clear out material. So if you can get it done in less space than that, that's great. That's kind of the goal, I guess. And this will also give you a little bit of adjustability. And the objective here was to actually make this approximately this long. Okay. Now when this thing rotates, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's got like a loop. So it's going to actuate down. And so that's kind of what we did there on the other one, with something like this. Just brought it back to a closed point like that. Just kind of rounded it a little bit so that it doesn't have a sharp point. So we'll just hang on to that and just give it a fold. Break that last little bit off. And we can use the grinder for the remnant. Alright, good. Alright, so now I would like to try to tighten up this bend a little bit if I can. So actually I need to support the plastic so it doesn't break. Give it a nice bend. You know, and at this point, there's more than one way to skin this cat, but this is the way I skin the other cat, so I want the cats to both be skinned the same way. If that makes any sense. Okay. So then when this moves, there's just like, you would have to really work it to make it come apart. Not impossible, but that's kind of the objective there. Okay, so then when this goes, it runs into it that way. And it's just like that one. So this will come and run into it and push it down. Okay? So this, we'll just slip that in there, and then we can see if we need any more trimming to make our pocket work properly. You want to make sure your wire sits down in there deep enough to more or less disappear. Which it looks like we still may have a little bit of product that we need to remove. It's kind of fighting me a little bit still. It's usually like one little piece that does that. See, that one little piece is blocking us from getting all the way down in there. Alright, cool. So now you can see how it's kind of riding up along the inside of the wing. So that's part of the reason why we don't have any of this stuff together yet. But at the same time, it's kind of nice because we can sit here and pull it in and out fairly easy. It's turned off right now, by the way, if that wasn't already blatantly obvious. Okay, so we're going to bend this out just a little bit. See, that gives us our adjustability in and out. And then we can always adjust it up and down a little bit as well. Okay. Then, of course, you can just lift the whole servo out, too, if you want. And to get our fine-tuning done, eventually we'll put a 3M piece on there, piece of double-sided tape. But for now, we're going to use a lot of just regular masking tape to hold things in position as we vet our positions. That's a very important, critical step, is to vet all these positions to make sure that you didn't screw something up. It's always easier to fix these things now than they are to kind of redesign the whole thing and have to move everything around, of course. Okay, so now one of the things that you guys didn't see is when I was working on the rubber bands, trying to get the retention and stuff like that. So we're about ready to do that. We should have everything hooked up, so let's go ahead and power it back up. Make sure the radio's on, throttle cut's on, all the switches are in the right positions. Got the XD60 here, so we'll go ahead and plug it in. Okay, so now at this point we can make sure we have room. And we have aileron deployment. Now, does it seem similar? You can kind of tell by how much it's lifting. You guys can kind of see how it's lifting up. About to my index fingernail. Okay? Of course, we have retention on this and we don't have retention on that. So, okay. So that's a good starting point. Then we can unplug the power from this system, shut off the radio. Now we need to flip this all upright. At this point, you could hypothetically probably get the servo wire taken care of, but I want to try to do this in the same order so we get similar outcome. There are certain steps, you do them in different order, you'll get a little different outcome. I wish that wasn't the case, but it's usually true. Okay, so now what we need to do is we actually need to tape down these spoilers so that we can position the we're just kind of keeping away from the ooh, we gotta go a little bit further out. Trying to keep away from the silver paint there. This is just to kind of hold it down while we're working. Okay, so now that'll be held in position as we do our next step. The next step, oh, we got a little bit of rubbing there, so we'll take the knife and trim out just a little bit of this material here. You want to trim as little as you can trim and still get the job done, of course. But you want to have some relative symmetry when you're done as well. Okay, so it would appear that we have yet a little bit still to go. And just keep doing it until you have it clear. Now, to a certain extent, that stuff will get pulled tight when you put the screw in, but you do have to be clear of it. Okay, so the way that we did the wire for this was pretty simple. We just bent a zigzag, and then we made it come out, and we can just kind of look at the other side a little bit and try to replicate that closely. I sharpen the tip, and then I dole it, and that gives me a nice finished end. And if we kind of look at this one, we'll probably have to deploy the flaps, of course, or deploy the spoilers for this part. Okay, so we can see real good. So we can bend this, make it similar. And then we can just rotate it to the other direction, but you got to keep it flat. Okay? It's like that one wasn't quite square. So I have to flatten this and then give it a little twist. And now we're back on path. Okay. Get that bent up. And then we'll make up the last little bit. Alright, so now this is the moment of truth here, where we have to kind of lay this down, and we'll make our fine-tune adjustments. Uh-oh. You hear that noise, guys? That means that the receiver is running out of power. That's when you switch to a different battery that isn't dead. If you ever see that happen, you'll know what's going on then. So, as you can imagine, this process is not a especially difficult one, but it's challenging to get them identical. So you want to try to get them as close to identical as you can, so that they behave about the same. Sorry about that, guys. Whacked the camera pretty good there. And then at the end, you'll have a flat spot. Bend it down, and then bend it back out, and you'll just kind of have to play this one by ear on how long to cut it. And this is just simply going to be a guide rod. It's not actually going to be attached on this end. So now, just as a heads up, my battery is going to be dying on the phone again here shortly, very shortly. And you see, I may have given us a little bit too much length here. So we'll just compare it over here. And it looks like we're a little bit too long on both extremes. So we can take that off. Take that off, and then take this. This one's going to be worth keeping. Yep, that should be better. Okay, folks, before the battery dies, I think I'm going to call it quits for now. Literally, the way I tested my rubber bands is I grabbed one like this, put some clear tape on it, stuck it into the position I wanted, and then I pulled it and taped it underneath the wing. And that's literally all I did. It was a total guess and check thing. I started from just a regular rubber band, cut it in half, and then I just cut it in half a few more times until I got it to an appropriate amount of resistance. I did use the same length on all of them though. So that's it. That's all I can share with you. Battery's about to die on me here. I'll give you a follow-up here in a little bit. Guys, thanks for being part of this build. YouTube, the time has come, finally. We have flaps. Crow. And spoilers. Okay, another shot. Ailerons. Operates the spoilers. Take off flaps. Landing flaps. Full spoilers. All off. Note the differential thrust. Elevator, rudder, steerable nose gear, ailerons, at any time, brakes, flaps, take off, landing, full, everything still works. Okay, now stabilizer is all the way up. You can watch the nose wheel or you can watch the tail. Throttle cut is off, so differential thrust should work, but only the rudder will work for stabilization. Okay, so now watch the elevator. Rudder, elevator, ailerons. Just like the real thing. And then of course there's stabilizer is on, off, on, off, 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 on. Master gain, master gain, master gain. All the way up, all the way down. Okay, so that's about the way I would be ready to fly it. Okay, so one radio setup change. I turned differential to -50 so that when we deploy less spoiler. Otherwise it deploys a lot of spoiler. It's like if we did -75. I want to show you what it looks like. Okay. Hardly any deflection. Okay. So now if I clear it to nothing, see how much it deploys? It's just too much. See how it doesn't deploy the ground brakes? Only just a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to set my differential back to -50. Now watch. Landing flaps, spoilers, so guys, and beyond that, look at the pre-stress in the wing. Up and then back down a little bit. Out and then back down. So I'm hoping that when I fly, the dihedral looks more realistic. But I can tell you this will. Looks so cool. Straight level. Guys, thanks for enduring this project. It's been a long one. We're not done with this plane yet, but we'll see how it does. Oh, and then we'll go ahead and throw the throttle cut on. The battery's loose in there, sorry guys. We'll give you guys a final look down here. Take off flaps, landing flaps, full crow, all the way. Stabilizer's all the way up now. Stabilizer, stabilizer, elevator, elevator, rudder. Okay. And of course, we have the stabilizer on off. And then differential thrust. Throttle cuts back on. So there you have it, guys. I got a 2200 milliamp test battery in there, so it's kind of flopping around a little bit, but should be no problem. If the weather holds out, tomorrow's our day, guys. Come back for more. Really. It's going to be some good stuff. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.